Dawn Over the Earth, Our Way into the Future with Thomas Berry was produced by Lou Nisnik. Tom begins by saying the universe is a celebration.
I frequently say that the universe, throughout its vast extent in space, and throughout its sequence of transformations in time, is a single, multiform, celebratory event. How many can say that? Let's hear you say it. The universe, throughout its vast extent in space, repeat it after me. The universe, throughout its vast extent in space, and throughout its sequence of transformations in time, is a single, multiform, celebratory event. You got it. So the answer for everything is celebration. What do the flowers do in the springtime? They celebrate. What do the birds do? They sing. What do the fish do? They celebrate. The leaves, the wind celebrates, the mountain celebrates, the animals. And they all constitute the universe. It's the meaning of things. It's the destiny of things, of all things. Each thing individually and all things together. So it's good to remind ourselves of this, and then to think of the human. Now, what is the human? The human is that being in whom the universe reflects on and celebrates itself in a special mode of conscious self-awareness. Let's do that one. The human is that being in whom the universe celebrates and reflects on and celebrates itself and its numinous origins in a special mode of conscious self-awareness. So that's our role. Let's get it down. The universe, no, not the universe, we've got this human. The human is that being in whom the universe reflects on and celebrates itself and its numinous origins in a special mode of conscious self-awareness. So, you've got the basic approach there as regards the universe and what the human is doing in the universe. All things celebrate, and so we have to bring ourselves into this picture. Now, the natural world is the locus. It's the place of the meeting of the divine and the human. And that was the disaster of Genesis. To take us away, in some sense, from the earth. But all of that's a long story. But the cosmological dimension is what's missing in our religious tradition. Take the Ten Commandments. Tells you nothing about it doesn't give you any responsibility for the natural world. You have to relate properly to the divine and humans with each other. Natural world's left out of the picture. Baptism. The person is introduced to the divine and to a human religious community. Natural world is left outside of it. The scripture was true that in the earlier days of Christianity, the natural world was considered a primary scripture. So there were two scriptures, the natural world and the Bible. But that was broken at the 16th century when we got caught up in redemption processes. So what do you do when you get redeemed? Well, you get redeemed again and again and again. We're always redeeming. We think we'll get it done and then we go on with life. But there's just a couple of other things, comments I'd like to make. Maybe all I'll do this morning is comment, but a couple of things that I'd just like to mention. It's about our present situation, and the idea is that when you come to a cliff, there is this process. Are we going backward? You know, got to go forward, got to go forward. When you come to a cliff, what do? You have three choices. You can go forward, or you can back up, or you can turn around and go forward into the future. You can accept the fact that there is no destiny in going over the cliff, and that is disaster, that a person needs to turn around and go forward and to settle in a mode of survival, a mode of life that is sustainable. And it reminds me too of that rather giddy aspect of progress of the man who fell off the Empire State Building, and he was passing the 34th floor, and he saw a friend, and he says, "I'm going all right so far." So what should he have said? Should have said, "Get the hell down there and put a safety net for me." But this question of going forward, going backward, and so forth is something. Now, as regards ourselves here today, it's really a glorious moment, I think, for all of us. And we can feel the experience, we can feel a surging tide of what's happening. We can feel a community beginning to take shape. We can feel the presence of Aldo Leopold, of John Muir and Thoreau. We can feel the presence of Rachel Carson, the presence of people such as the people that have led us so far into the present, John and Nancy Todd, Wes Jackson, and presently Annie Dillard, and the great host of people and writers, Gary Snyder and Barry Lopez at the present time, a great multitude of people, but particularly I feel the presence today of Loren Eiseley. Loren Eiseley, I think, appreciated the spirit of the earth and the spirit of every being on the earth, the spirit of the animals and so forth. And he had this special rapport with the life systems, and more, I think, than any of the other nature writers. And this recovery of the nature writers has begun to provide for us what I call a new order of religious sensitivities. And if I were to describe what I look forward to and hope for in the future, it's not exactly a new religion. It is something like a meta-religion that we're into. It's something that's providing a larger context for all religions, and also is making available new sensitivities, a new type of sensitivities for all traditional religions. And there is correspondingly, in so many of the religious traditions, there is a new fundamentalism that is beginning to assert itself. Not beginning, but it's a very strong sense of not moving into this direction. But what is taking shape is something like a new religious set of feelings, of sensitivities. I call it the third mediation. The religions, I think, have gone through two basic phases. The one is to carry out divine human relations, to establish an intimate rapport between the divine and the human, and also the interhuman, the pathos of the human. If there's one thing that characterizes a lot of the religious sensitivities of our times, it is the pathos of the human. And with the churches, there's a tremendous documentation and effort and just an enormous amount of attention and of sympathy is poured over the earth for the suffering of humans. But this has, in a sense, been so intense that it has, in a way, blocked a feeling for the integral functioning of the earth. A person comes across frequently that a human is more important than the trees or something like that. But that kind of gives a false impression. Because if we're losing in this country something like 4 to 6 billion tons of topsoil every single year, how can we take care of people? I frequently say that we cannot directly take care of people anymore because a mission, all missions now, whether political missions or economic missions or religious missions, must deal with the total society. And there is no such thing as human society, separate from the air and the water and the soil and the various living modes of life. The human doesn't exist in any separate thing. There is only the one sacred community. That is, we have the vast sacred community of the universe, the sacred community of the earth, the sacred community of life, and then we have the sacred community of the different areas, or the different bioregions. The valley, the Hudson River Valley is a sacred community. But it's a sacred community not simply of humans, it is the river and the water and the fish and the birds and the trees, and the whole community is one sacred community. And that is of such enormous importance, and a feel for this is beginning to exist. So what I speak of sometimes is the third mediation, divine-human mediation. I think myself that is not at all the difficulty. That people do have a sense of the divine. They express it in many ways. Some are more conscious of that presence than others. But it is, I think, an accepted thing and interhuman. We haven't worked out these problems of the interhuman, but we have to move, and one of the reasons why we have not done it, and one of the reasons why we do not have a better relationship with the divine, is because we do not have an adequate relationship with the natural world. And a person might say, peace among peoples through peace with the earth. Peace between humans and the divine through peace with the earth. Because it is in this relationship with the natural world, that we find the divine, and that is where our meeting is. Now, I would like to give some idea of where we are. A person says, where are we? And what are we to do? We are at the end of the Cenozoic period in the story of the earth. What is happening now is not simply another historical change or cultural modification. We frequently tell the history of the classical period and the movement from classical civilization to medieval to Renaissance to industrial age. That is totally inadequate. It is totally false in its overall impression if we think that what's happening now, that the transition now is in that sequence, simply in that sequence of transformations. Something vastly different is happening. We're changing the chemistry of the planet. We're changing the biosystems of the planet in a deleterious way. We are changing the planet on a scale of hundreds of millions of years in a single decade or a few decades. We are wiping out the rainforest that took 60 million years to bring into existence, but we are destroying at the rate of an acre a second. It's even more than that. It's something the size of a football field every second is being lost. And the rainforest carries probably something like half of the species, of the living species of the planet are there. It's certainly the greatest concentration of life anywhere in the universe that we know about, and that is the planet Earth. And so it's, in a way, certainly among the most beautiful thing in creation, extinguishing it a second. And one writer about the rainforest who was caught up in this mystique of the rainforest mentioned that in comparison to the natural world, particularly the rainforest and its creativity, the creativity of humans is like the squeak of a mouse in proportion to all the symphonies ever written. Human creativity in relation to the creativity of the natural world or the rainforest is not very much, because this carries that astounding amount. So, why have we done this? I look back over the years of my life, and I talk about my generation as the autistic generation. My generation never heard the voice of the trees, or the voice of the river, or the voice of the mountains. You saw flowers, we enjoyed the seacoast, we went to the mountains for recreation and so forth, we skied and all that, but we never really heard the voices. My generation is autistic. An autistic person is someone that is locked into themselves. You see children sometimes, an autistic child. It's not that they can't speak physically, it's not that they're not intelligent, but they're locked into themselves in such a way that they can't get out, they can't speak, and nobody else can get in. And so we have that situation where humans in my generation, I suggest, has been an autistic generation. I would like to give you some idea of what I think is the approach to the future. And here are the basic principles that I would suggest. That we are at the end of the Cenozoic. That's the last 65 million years of Earth history. It is the lyric period of Earth history. It's the period of the birds, of the flowers in a very special way. It's the period when the mammals developed as they are and made ourselves possible. So for 65 million years, the Earth has produced the world as we see it. It is the Cenozoic. What we need to do is to go into the Ecozoic. Now, here are the conditions of entry into the Ecozoic, and I don't think that there is any future except through the Ecozoic. This transition, there is an alternative that many people are trying to go into. A lot of people want to go into the Technozoic. But the Technozoic is an extension of the industrial plundering society that has got us where we are at the present time. Now, what are the conditions for going into the Ecozoic? First condition is to accept the fact that the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. The universe, and particularly planet Earth, is composed of subjects to be communed with, not objects to be manipulated or exploited. If we do not grasp this, a subject is a being with a voice, with a spontaneity, and everything has a voice. Everything has a spontaneity. Everything is capable of presence. Everything expresses itself. An atom has that mystical quality of communion with every other atom of the universe. An atom has a great depth of intelligibility. Anything that has intelligibility has a spirit nature. And so that we can say that the universe is subject, and these spirit powers are understood by humans throughout the world. We had somebody like Henry Frankfurt, when he talks about the Middle East and of the rise of the different civilizations, and he mentions that the difference between the people then and the people now is that for them the outer world, the natural world, was thou, not it. And that's what's the difference between ourselves, say, and the American Indians. It's so important to appreciate that, and that is what we can learn from. That's the first principle. The second principle is that the planet Earth is primary and humans are derivative. This is the most difficult thing to understand. And particularly those of us who live in a society where the human has been considered a spiritual being and everything else is mechanistic, everything else is to be used for the sake of the human. We shatter the universe as soon as we begin to see the universe around us as object, as we see the earth as object. And also, as soon as we lose that sense that the earth is primary, we are derivative. When I say the earth community is primary, what I have in mind is that is not the earth apart from ourselves, but ourselves in the earth, and that is the primary sacred community. And at every step, in every profession, in every institution, we have to think first the earth, then ourselves. Now, there is this question about it. For us, even human societies, we begin with the part and try to make wholes, like with Hobbes and his political theory. Humans are together, and that's where we get social compact theories, juridic relationships, because we start with individuals and try to make wholes. There's another way of thinking that the individual comes into being as within the whole, like the body. The body takes shape, the hands take shape within the larger structure, within the larger organic structure of things. And so that, and each thing has its proper role, its proper place and function. But if we start from parts, we will never get to wholes, organic wholes. We will come into mechanistic wholes. If we think of the human as coming into being as in that separate relationship, then the outer world will always be out there. We will not be in communion with it. And that is where it's so important. Take in medicine. The first purpose of medicine should not be the human specifically. The first person of medical profession or healing profession should see to the integrity of the earth. It's the only way we can help humans. Ultimately, we must deal with humans directly in a way, but what we need to do, something like the Omaha, not the Omaha, but the Navajo Indians, when they heal, they have this dry painting of the universe, of the cosmological order, and the person is placed within this context, and the forces of the universe are brought together to carry out the healing procedure. And even with ourselves, our medicines and all of that are ultimately derived from the cosmological order, but mechanically, not mystically. There isn't that sense of rapport. But we are still trying to recognize that you cannot have well humans on a sick planet. And medical profession is still trying to have well humans by technologies on a sick planet. Whereas its first thing is to heal the planet and the humans within that. Humans aren't separated from that. You don't heal the planet and the humans separately, but you do not get a human health apart from that. Same with economics. The most silly thing ever attempted is to have a rising gross national product with a declining gross earth product. If the earth product is going down, the human product has no future. Obvious. Economics, medicine, education, all education should be in a natural history context. All education is within this context. History, what is education? It's learning the story of the universe and the role of the human in the story. That's education. It's knowing the story of the universe and the role of the human in the universe. If you don't, that's the unifying thing. That's the context of intelligibility. And you begin and you see and you observe the universe and how it functions. And then we find that the role of the human in the universe. That is the great story. That is where the divine is. That is where the deep mysteries of existence are. That's where the philosophy is. That's where, but it's a type of rapport, a type of presence, and so forth that we exist with that. So that's the second. The third thing is this, that of course progress, to be true progress, cannot be human progress by plunging the natural world. But here's the next main point, is that the universe, and this is really the thing that's most difficult possibly, the universe, or the planet Earth, will never again function in the future the way it has functioned in the past. We literally and absolutely at a point of the most radical change, certainly as regards the human, as regards the planet itself. It's the most radical change since the planet took its first shape.
in this sense, that whereas up until now, the planet, and in particular the Cenozoic period, carried out its role independently of any human or any intellectual assent or agreement or implication. In the future, almost nothing is going to happen that does not in some manner involve a human presence and a human participation of some kind. In this way, that we cannot make a blade of grass, but there's liable not to be a blade of grass unless humans accept it, protect it, and foster it. The forest, until now, they came into being independently of ourselves, the fish and the birds and the clouds and the weather and the ozone layer, and all of that had no there were the components that went to it, but in terms of their future being decided to such a large extent by a rational, deliberate decision on the part of any component of the planet, this is a new story. And that is our greatest difficulty. And we have assumed the responsibility. That's awesome. Now, so what we need to do, and this is why this is a change and require a discipline, and it's in order of magnitude, it will require all our understanding, all our science, but science that is, and technology that is ordained for rapport with the technologies of the earth and to support the technologies of the earth rather than to disintegrate these technologies. And for this, we need a new soul. A new soul. This is a new spiritual experience for the whole order of things. It's a new spiritual experience for the birds and the trees and so forth, to experience this type of presence of the human. It's a most mysterious thing, and it's why all our religions of the past are not that helpful, because this requires something of a new order of things. So there are these. Now there's one other thing I would say. This changes, ethics changes everything in the sense that we need a new ethics that not only considers suicide, homicide, genocide, but understands biocide and geocide, which we are presently involved with in a certain way. There's one other thing that's needed is a new language. I frequently say we should put the Bible on the shelf for 20 years until we learn to read the scriptures of the natural world. Well, I would also say that maybe we should put Webster on the shelf for 20 years until we work out some new definitions. That our language doesn't give us the words that we need. We don't have the ethics in our ethical sciences. We don't have the adequate terms. The ethics doesn't recognize the word biocide, geocide. There are these terms that are most important. But here, there are just a couple of other things that I want to say. One is this. As regards ourselves, as regards this group, as regards the community, the human community at the present time, we didn't choose to be here. That is, to be alive at the end of the 20th century. We were put here. We were brought into being independently of any decision any of us made. We are a generation of destiny. And this responsibility is given us it brings with it the support of the whole cosmological order that brought us here in the first place. I call it the grace of the moment. Not exactly in a religious sense, but in a meta-religious sense, in a sense that it's a cosmological sense. The universe knows how to run itself. Planet Earth knows how to run itself. And the planet Earth chose us to be here at this time. There were other forces that went into the process that brought us here. But ultimately, it's the Earth that brought us here. And the Earth gives us the guidance that we need, it gives us the support that we need, and we don't need to feel that personally, or just this as a group, or even our whole society, that we are alone. The trees are for us. The air is for us. The water is for us. All things are for us. And we need to be able to feel and experience the support. And we look out at the sound here, and the water and the waves. They're speaking to us and addressing us and telling us about themselves and asking us to establish a rapport with them. The trees speak, the wind speaks, the sky speaks, the sun and the moon. All of these speak to us, but we've got to develop the capacity to hear, listen. What are the trees saying? What do you hear? Here, listen. Here is something that I hear. When I listen, I hear the leaves and trees. In the human order, here's what I hear. I hear the crash of the whole industrial, plundering world. It's over with. I hear it. I see it almost. That the bankruptcy. It's not simply that places like New York City or the state or that this country has gone into $3 trillion up toward $4 trillion debt and the far greater part of that in 10 years. It's not simply, but what does a person, and the whole petrochemical age, what does a person hear? I hear that last effort to suck up from the earth those last drops of petroleum, but it's over with. What does a person hear? When a person thinks, a person, or what does a person see? Well, we begin to see the breakup of these great highway system. The bridges are falling. The bridges are falling. And we, in vain, we are trying desperately to get the money, to get the resources, but it can't be. There are three basic reasons why the industrial world cannot continue. The first is the lack of psychic energy. Because the people that put up this saw only the bright side of the industrial world. The first part of this century saw the bright side of the subways. And we got into the petrochemical industry. We had the benefits of it. We didn't see. We didn't want to see or hear or learn about the deleterious side. So we can't bring the psychic energy into this at this order of magnitude. The second thing is the financial resources are not available. The industrial system is not a viable system as we have it. The earth cannot support it. And the third thing is the natural resources are diminished. Those are three basic reasons why the industrial world is over with. We are the transition generation from the industrial age at this order of magnitude to into the future. And the future has to be a future built within the ever-renewing processes of the natural world. And that is the larger context of what we're into. And it's building not simply this new area of the natural world, it's building the new human order, the new religious order. Now, just a couple of things that sense that the whole natural world is itself bringing this about. When I say that we need to accept, protect, and foster, it's not that we can do what the trees do. We cannot do what the forests. We cannot positively do this, but it's got to be a question of rapport, of an intimacy, a mutuality, an evocatory relationship. I would like to go to something that comes up often. Chief Seattle, we've heard this many times, I'm sure, but it's something that continues to be enormously important, I think. And sometimes it's said that this was the version that we have sometimes was concocted later by a writer, script writer for a movie, but it is in the historical records of the state of Washington, and it is a valid document. And the person that translated it said himself that it was even more glorious than the way in which he had translated it. Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished, when the rocks, which seem to be dumb and dead as they swelter in the sun along the silent shore, thrill with memories of stirring events connected with the lives of my people, and the very dust upon which you now stand resounds more lovingly to their footsteps than to yours, because it is rich with the blood of our ancestors, and our bare feet are conscious of the sympathetic touch. Astounding statement. It's something that a person needs to brood upon. Now, when will we have those experiences? We're beginning to have these experiences. That is what's so remarkable. We've begun to have these experiences. This is not alien to us anymore. This is begin to be a psychic experience of ourselves and our children, so that there is a new something happening. And when I give a title, I had something in mind, and I was looking for a title, and if I would give a title to my thinking at the present time, I would call it Dawn Over the Earth, Our Way into the Future. It would be a good title for this meeting. Dawn Over the Earth, Our Way into the Future. It's a fascinating way. There is this question of what to do. There have been at least 50 to 100 books published in the past 3 or 4 years on what to do. There's one just came out by John Narr, Design for a Livable Planet. There's the one of Jerry Rifkin, Green Lifestyle. There are guides to purchases and so forth. So that there's no lack of practical day-to-day guidance to the 10,000 things that we need to do. We need to merely be aware of the fact that if we do it, we must not do it in order in a vain quest to have to move into a continuation to make the industrial system as we have it viable. It won't work, at least in my opinion. So it must be done as transition to another more visionary world that has to live in our dreams, but in an effective way, not simply as a kind of an enthusiasm of something that will carry us for a while. And then is what to do. There's a blueprint for the environment. This was given to Bush when he was first became president, and it tells every single agency of the government what the problem is and what they should do about it in great detail. Every department of government, justice, commerce, every department of the cabinet, and all the program, so that we are now getting the specifics of what to do. It's in the practical affairs. What is needed is the psychic energy to go about it. But coming back to a concluding statement, is this, that the human community and the natural world will go into the future as a single sacred community, or we will both perish in the desert. Now, it's not quite true that the natural world will perish in any comprehensive way, but the world is, or the planet Earth, as we have known it, and in this type of grandeur at the end of this phase of the Cenozoic, will certainly is losing a very important part of its grandeur, and that is what would perish. And that is what I have in mind when I say that we will both perish in the desert. It will not be, the humans may very well survive too, but in a diminished level of fulfillment, a diminished level of fulfillment. So that as this, there's one destiny, in other words, one destiny for the humans and for the planet, not in an absolute sense, but in a relative sense, at least. And so I would leave you with that thought, that the human community and the natural world will go into the future as a single sacred community, or we will both extensively perish in the desert. Thank you.
New People, Reinventing the Human with Thomas Berry was produced by Lou Nisnik.
I sometimes suggest that we are reinventing the human. I have a sentence that goes something like this. The historical mission of our times is to reinvent the human. There's 7 phrases in this one sentence, and it carries my basic thinking. The historical mission of our times is to reinvent the human at the species level, with critical reflection within the community of life systems, in a time developmental context, by means of story and shared dream experience. The most important thing of all of this is the shared dream experience. Life is dreamed. When we're children, we dream, or we think about the future. And the thoughts of a child, a very young child, about the future are something like dreams. It's why the education of children is, or I don't know if I call it education exactly, certainly not formal education, but the care of children and the establishing context in which the children can evoke their dreams. What we're dealing with here in the eco-village, it's a dream. How do we dream the eco-village? We're not going to be able to work out all the mechanics. Mechanics of it will come in time. But we have to have the dream first, before anything. I think as Carl Jung said, and I repeated endlessly, that the dream drives the action. But the dream not only drives the action, the dream guides the action. It's our dreams that are most important. If we consider how we got into our present situation, it's very simple. We dreamed something, and that dream turned into a pathology. It was a dream of a glorious world. I generally relate it to the most traumatic experience of Western civilization, which probably would be the Black Death, the plague that struck the Western world or the European world in 1347. Between that time and 1349, perhaps a third of Europe died. You can imagine a third of Europe dying. Half the people of Florence, I believe, died in 3 months. It was an extraordinary stroke, and I don't like to trace monumental historical changes to any single incident. But this was a terrifying thing, particularly because they had absolutely no explanation. They had no idea of germs. They didn't have any way of explaining this. And of course, we always generally go to moral explanations that the earth was somehow wicked or had become wicked, and the humans had become unworthy. And so God was punishing. Now this sense of punishment, it reflected itself in the preaching. For the first time, Christians began to preach a spiritual revival based on 4 things: death, judgment, heaven, hell. The morality plays were built on this, the everyman play, which the only thing that's worthwhile looking for in life is what you take with you when you die. And the only thing you take with you are your virtues. So, poverty, everything in the temple order becomes evanescent, in a certain sense unreal. And so there was an element of what a person might call escape out of the world and to be redeemed out of the world rather than to learn how to live effectively and magnificently and a sacred life in the world. And this was the time, and then a little later, over against the religious redemption view, and this hit the 15th century particularly, was a time when the dance of death was developed. Also, Ars Moriendi, the art of dying, was developed in the 15th century. There were some 40-some texts of this, the art of dying, and then the morality plays were built in on this and so forth. So this was a psychic trauma, you might say, in the Western mind. A little later, the scientific development took place. So rather than deal with this by redemption out of the world, Francis Bacon particularly proposed that we learn to control the world. Control it. Let's investigate it. Torture nature. He uses that to torture nature, to give up its secrets so that we could control the world. And from then on, the sciences and technologies began to be invented, and the dream of a wonder world that we could achieve, we could transform this world and realize the millennial expectation of the biblical world, we could do it by our sense of control of the world, and that was what it was to be human. And so we entered on to this dynamism of control, and that's why even science at the present time, or in recent times, is inseparable from technology. It's a drive toward technological controls that have developed, but at the end of it, like all advertising, I think, is millennial vision. It's this vision of a world that we can make if we just learn how to manipulate things. So that turned into the dream that drives our industrial world. And even this is the dream of Wonder World. It's a Disney dream. Actually, right now, the incarnation of this dream is Disney World. The more we learn to manipulate, the more we turn the world into Disneyland. And that's a kind of an ideal. But while this wonder world is is driving us to these controls, we're really making waste world. So, but our attention is focused on wonder world. Don't think about the waste world, wonder world. Now the ecologists begin to see the waste world, and they can't get the rest of people to recognize that there is such a thing as waste world, that the wonder world is an illusory dream. Now, so we come to this question of dream. We need to dream of a time when humans would be present to the world, to the planet in a mutually enhancing manner. Not to make wonder world, to accept, but above all, it has to be a dream within the context in which life is granted us. Life is granted us within limits. And we have to dream and guide our actions within those limits. There is this idea, we can do anything, we can do this, so if we can do it, do it. Well, we don't consult the earth. How do we function? But let's go back to, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this, would like to take a little bit to talk about this sentence. The historical mission of our times is to reinvent the human at the species level. Now, all things invent themselves. God doesn't produce a puppet world where everything is manipulated. He enables things to function themselves, to create themselves. The universe is a self-creating process. It doesn't mean that there's not some deep, numinous mystery at the center of things. What it does mean is that that it's a self-organizing process. That's the wonder of creation. It's self-realizing process. And in this self-realizing process, the human is above all and above everything of the being a self-creative, creating being. Because whereas the guidance at the pre-human level is contained almost completely in genetic coding. And genetic coding is just the deepest mystery of all. And that's my basic world of thought, is the dynamism of the genetic coding, because our genetic coding It gives us our structure of our being. It gives us the color of our eyes and the shape of our bodies. And it even establishes much of the capacities that we work with. Now, but we are genetically coded toward a transgenetic cultural coding that we invent ourselves. Now, this is much more, say, than any other organic being, because some do have this capacity of self-creation, but and some animals need to be taught after they're brought into being. But a bird knows how to build its nest. It doesn't need to be taught how to build its nest generally, or how to get its food, how to guide its migratory patterns, and so forth. The whole thing is given in the genetic coding, basically with a minimum of acculturation process. But with the human, the acculturation is primary. We are genetically coded toward a transgenetic cultural coding that we invent ourselves. And this gives us a great variety of cultural articulations of the human. That's why they have the Chinese world, the Confucian world, where we have the Buddhist and Hindu world, and all these different acculturation forms. So, and it's a social thing. And it's handed on by education. For instance, there's this. We are genetically determined to think. We don't have a choice to think or not to think. We only have a choice of how we think, and we do have that choice. We don't have a choice to live in society or not to live in society. We do have a choice of how we shape our societies. We don't have a choice of speaking and not speaking, but we do have a choice of how we create language. We create our languages and so forth. So we don't have a choice of bringing moral judgments to bear. We are genetically coded to do that. How we determine that is our own determination. Now, we are at a point, and that's the issue that's before us. We are at the point where all the traditional cultural forms that have guided our sense of reality and value are inadequate to deal with the issues that we face. In my opinion, at least, that's my basic orientation. That we cannot get our adequate coding from any of the traditions, and that is a very difficult thing. Our Western cultural tradition, our religious humanist tradition, is not adequate for what we have to deal with. We have passed into a different context of existence, largely through our discoveries of the universe and the new powers that we have. And the traditional cultures can't deal with that adequately. Our Genesis story is not adequate to deal with this new story of the universe that we have. And there's that tension, and many people still expect a total guidance from the tradition. They can't understand that we've got to get our guidance from our experience, and we have to reshape the thing and that's in a new order of things. I consider our new sense of the universe is revelatory. Not revelatory exactly in the sense of the Bible or any of the other revelatory traditions. There's a multiplicity of revelatory experiences that enable us to shape our human existence and to achieve that fullness of being that's proper to the human. It can be achieved in many different ways. Now, at the present time, this change, I think, is, and it doesn't negate any of the former traditions. They will always be central, or they will always be a needed component of the formation of the human. But I consider that they're inadequate simply in themselves, and that we have needed this new experience that's experienced at the depth of revelatory experience. So that at the present time we have to reshape the human within this new context. We have to rediscover ourselves. Our traditions reveal who we are as humans, how we function up until now, and it's been helpful, and we'll always need that, because that tells us things that the new revelatory experience doesn't tell us. So it's not a case of choosing one or the other, but it is a question of choosing a new context and in order to deal with the new problems, because these are beyond, in my view, simply the others, because the new experience brings with it a new mode of being for the whole universe in a way. But certainly for the human, and certainly for the planet Earth. The planet Earth no longer exists in the form that it had before we developed our new knowledge of the universe. Our new knowledge of the universe has changed the universe, and particularly has changed the planet Earth. So it's no longer the same planet exactly. We are no longer quite the same beings. And we have to discover ourselves. And this is why there is this particular difficulty. Because we haven't been able to do this soon enough to avoid the destruction that we find ourselves in. But we need to rethink ourselves, to rediscover who we are as human beings within this context. Now, let me go through the sentence. We need to, the Historical Mission of our times, reinvent the human I say at the species level because we have to go back to our mandate, our genetic mandate. If that's our ultimate referent as human, because the genetic mandate is what makes us human. If that's off, then we don't have any chance. That is our that's our authentication. But how we identify and develop, that's the problem. But we need to reinvent ourselves at the species level because the cultures can no longer carry us with critical reflection. That is, originally we could do it with a certain spontaneity. We can't do that anymore. We need to do this with an understanding, with a conscious mode of re-identifying ourselves. Within the community of life systems, that's the key. Because in our former, certainly with our Western tradition, we thought of the human as somehow in the world, but not of it. And the sacred community was a human community. That's not valid. Within the community of life systems. And that is why the dream, the industrial dream, that takes us out of the identity with the life systems and makes us predators on that system, which is predatory relationship with ourselves, basically, and suicidal with ourselves, that is no longer effective. So it's reinvent ourselves and to be critical reflection within the community of life system. There's one sacred community. And the way I say it is this way, that the human community and the natural world will go into the future as a single sacred community, or we will both perish on the way. That's a sentence that I think is the most important sentence that I speak about. The human community and the natural world will go into the future as a single sacred community, or we will both perish on the way. Now, in the time developmental context, that is, our mode of consciousness now has shifted from a spatial mode of consciousness where time moves in ever-renewing seasonal cycles to a position where time moves in a developmental sequence of transformation, irreversible. In a spatial mode of consciousness, where time moves in seasonal, ever-renewing cycles, there's no irreversibility. Everything dies and is reborn forever and ever and ever. It always was, always would be. That's no longer, we can't accept that. But we now simply as that, there is that aspect of time. It does move in seasonal cycles. But we have to qualify that statement, though, with the awareness that time moves irreversibly. And that's the trouble of where we are now. What we are doing is largely irreversible. It's irreversible. It's not going just to, like the winter-fall season, seasonal renewal thing, where everything that dies where everything is born dies, and what dies is reborn. That is the universe that people lived in. But now we must live in a time developmental transformation context. By means of story, that is, we need to reinvent the human by means of story. And that's why I think the story of the universe is so utterly and absolutely important. Because it's through the story. We have the former stories, all the civilizations, and the human establishes its rapport with the universe through the story of the universe. And it is the story of the universe, whether it's the Hindu world or Buddhist world, the primary orientation of any of the tradition is this sense of how to see the universe, how to see the human role in the universe. And with us, we have a new sense of the story of the universe. It's sacred story. And these two things, these two experiences, are not exclusionary. They are, as I expressed it, like light, that in some ways light has to be treated as though it were energy waves, in some instances as though it were discrete particles. You cannot reduce them. You cannot reduce these two conceptions of time to any single one. We live with both of them. But we need to know this story, this more comprehensive story, and there are wonderful things about this story of the universe that we have. Why is that such a wonderful story? There are many reasons, but one of the most important things that it reveals the relatedness of everything. Everything is cousin to everything else, particularly in the world of life. We are born out of the same process, into the same community, totally implicated in each thing, totally implicated with everything else. So that we have this, we are not strangers in the universe. The universe is bound to support us. The universe is bound to us in a way, in particular the planet Earth, particular life systems of the planet Earth. And that's why this is the larger dimension of ourselves. This is our story. This is my personal story. I don't know my personal story if I do not have the story of the universe. I don't need to know it and all its scientific paraphernalia and all that. But I do need to know that the universe came into being. It had these wonderful transformation processes in the stardust. And out of the stardust, the earth takes shape. And on the earth, the continents are formed and life comes, and then I come along. 14 billion years it took to make my hand. My hand wouldn't be this hand any sooner or any later. It's taken that long. Now, for each of us, so that everything is infinitely precious because everything is taken this long of time. And so the marvel of it is relatedness. But it's also articulated entities, and to come to the eco-village. It's one of the things that we are finding difficulty in this country is finding a nuclear, a cohesive, attractive center. In Europe and in most countries of the world, you move from one village to another through intervening space. In Italy, the last time I was there, I remember, you see a village on the side. You see this clustered housing. And there, the piazza and so forth at the center. And there is that integral life, and then there's the countryside, and then you have another village. You don't go through this endless suburbs and so forth, the flow of things into each other. You don't know where the lines are. There, it's visibly present, the articulated entity. And so that is the way in which it functions, but every articulated entity related to every other articulated entity, and all together needed for each other. And then the shared dream experience. I think you can appreciate that. And to appreciate that our role involves this. And I think that up in Great Barrington, that we don't know our dreams sometimes until they find their flowering, but it must be a great feeling to see a dream flower into reality, because it had to first be the idea. We can relate to each other. We can establish a magnificent human community. And it's very simple. There are a few techniques that we need to learn, but if only we do these little things, there's magic. That's what we need, the dream, the magic, the mystery. Every village, it's a mystery. Ask, how did it happen? It's a mystery. We can have Susan tell us all about how the mystery functions, but there's a mystery. Mystery how the bank got involved. But this, so in this sense, I think that a group like ourselves, I think, as we go through the technicalities, I think that there is some value in reflections of this nature, and something else too. To inspire our work is the fact that, just like in this instance, there's no telling where something like this goes. The world, Christianity, started in a cave and so forth, and 12 people, and all of a sudden it happens. Buddha selected a few disciples, Confucius and all that, and after a while, things take. So with our present. We must never underestimate the power that we possess. It requires a thought and a dream, and it requires a certain effort, sometimes a prolonged thing. In my own life, in my own work, people see some of the things I did, and I see people 30, 35, 40, haven't gotten anywhere. I didn't have anything done until I was 50, 55. But this, so a person lives through periods of formation and of thought and the struggle and all that. But that's carried, of course, by the dream, and the dream makes it possible. And a person simply has to know the authenticity of the dream. And where it will end, no, we can't underestimate it. So, with a gathering like this, one of the things that I would say, and tomorrow I would hope we can talk a little more about the children, because it is the children that I think of most. People ask sometimes, interviews and so forth, how did you get into some of this? And sometimes say for the children. They cannot endure handing on the planet any more damage than I can help, because I would feel that I deserted the children. And a greater part of any generation consists in their bringing into being and assisting the next generation to be themselves and to develop and to be able to do what they are called to do by history. And so in this sense, perhaps tomorrow we can think some more about that. But this is just a few comments today to, I'm not sure I answered the rethinking of the human, but somewhere in there, there's an idea about the human.
Tom now receives questions and comments from the audience. The first question is about environmental ethics and Native American spirituality, a sense of the sacred.
Well, there is this sense of the sacred. Certainly this is the primary experience, we might say, of humans, almost universally as far as I know, that their perception of the universe has to do with the a numinous power presence throughout the total order of things, and that everything has its dignity, a role, and that is reverence. Reverence for everything, because everything carries the majesty and the meaning of things. In itself, I would like to separate, there are two things I would like to indicate here, is not to get caught up in the sense of the divine. Christianity, as frequently Christians talk about the sacramental dimension of things. That is, the water becomes sacred and it's used in baptism, and bread and wine are used in the Eucharist and so forth, special mode of divine presence and so forth. So we tend to, even spiritual use of something is not exactly what this is about, to my mind, because what we want to get at as the reality, the intrinsic value of the thing itself. It has a sacred dimension, but I don't want the sacred element to do away with the reality, like love somebody. Well, I love because it's a commandment to love, or I love you because of God, or something like that. It is subject, present, identity with each other, and of things having this mode of presence to each other. And back of it all, there is the world of the sacred. And it's one of the important things about being environmentalist and an ecologist. For an environmentalist, we place ourselves as the basic value, and we want the environment to be benign environment so that it won't hurt us. It's not for the community itself. We don't see ourselves as integral with the community, but something that the environmental movement still wants the universe to save us. And the important thing is not to save us. The important thing is to save the planet, to save the total community, and to save ourselves in the total community. but to accept the fact that the community is more important than the human, ultimately. And the human, the larger dimension, a person has to be, and this is very sensitive areas, and how we express it is not easy, except that we do want a centering of ourselves in a larger community of things. And I think that's what the American Indian has in mind.
If you're retelling the story of our species, and you mentioned those four elements that arise in Christianity: death, judgment, heaven, and hell.
Thing of life, beauty, and beatitude, or something like that. but it's an effort at a certain frightening, and it's lasted up to our times. And in my time, that was mission preaching. You're supposed to evoke spirituality from people. I said, you're going to die tomorrow, you better get on the ball. Who else is here?
Having posited a self-creating universe where God is either dead or disinterested in the course of things, it could be dangerous if your premises are incorrect and God in fact did create and did have a plan and is integrally involved and is speaking to mankind today, and his obedience or failure therein results in damnation and hell. You see, if your premises are incorrect and the other story is true, it's not going to be a laughing matter.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I get it clear. This is not, when I say the universe is self-creating, I'm not eliminating the divine. I'm not saying that that there's not a deeper mystery that brings the universe into being, but once that is bestowing the power of self-creativity. It's not absolute self-creativity in the sense which we think of the divine, but it is self-creative in the sense that it is has the power of self-creating. And then the question is, can the divine create a self-creating universe? And the basic answer that I would give is that this is the way in which the universe comes to being.
We've been speaking of an intentional village, an intentional echo village, an intentional community. Our very ability to conceive of an intentional village is reflected in the biblical tradition of us being created in the image of God, who had intentions when he created us.
Yeah.
And his intentions were not in an luminous sense of energy. He had a purpose and a plan for both the creation and fulfillment of the universe. And he's reflected that to us in a tradition of writing, which, when we're in harmony with that tradition, gives us a great deal of peace, to have a sense of joining in harmony with the plan and purpose of God that he gave us. Lacking that agreement and harmony, we find ourselves frequently in a state of disorientation, where we're plagued with a necessity to try to find some hook into this luminous plasma swamp that has somehow just self-generated itself. There's a better solution, and that is identifying with the traditions and the histories of the Father in a personal God who's dictated a beginning and an end with a plan along the way that we can agree with.
Well, that's the traditional Christian, Western, biblical type of approach. And I don't find that much difficulty with it, except that I don't think it's an adequate way of speaking about creation. I think creation is not that much, pre-planned, so to speak. may be, but I want to deal with these questions, particularly the questions of the divine, within the context in which the divine presents itself through the universe as we are able to understand it, as we are able to establish rapport with it. And we establish rapport with the universe that has gone through this wonderful sequence of transformations in its unfolding in a very mysterious way. And there's an overall direction. The direction of the universe seems to be in terms of increasing differentiation with greater unity in the whole, and particularly on the planet Earth. But I don't think, for myself and for contemporary people, I think we need a sense that the divine is revealing itself to us in this process, so that rather than thinking of a kind of a pre-planned process, I find it more effective to approach it that way.
Well, by way of testimony, I held to a basically pantheistic attitude toward the creation for a number of years. And at a certain point in my life, when I reached a place of bankruptcy, I received a direct encounter with a biblical God that spoke to me according to the precepts of the Scriptures, where he said, "I am my good shepherd, and the sheep hear and know and obey my voice." It was in the hearing of that voice and the subsequent obedience that I developed a rapport that I desired and longed for in my relationship with these issues that you're dealing with. And I have an innate confidence that the wise God that's an intentional creator, having enough people able to hear that voice and broken enough and willing enough to obey that voice, will join in harmony with his ultimate intention of creating an ongoing stable universe. That rapport that you're referring to is available through the traditional Christian mode of understanding of the divine.
Well, the Christian understanding, I think what I'm saying is basically compatible with Christian conceptions of the divine, but I think the Christian explanation of their own belief is not adequate. And one of the reasons why is that they are not able to, out of that background, to deal with this catastrophe. Why is it that if that context is so powerful, why are Christians so insensitive to the most devastating thing in the whole divine manifestation?
Tom now spends 10 minutes talking about the needs and the challenge for children.
I think it's on the minds of all of us. The needs of children, they need to be nourished not only physically, but from the beginning they need to be nourished with the human voice and touch and cuddling and all that. And this sense of that the universe is ultimately a benign reality. It's going to challenge them and push them to their limits, but that it's a magnificent context in which to have a magnificent life in this relationship to the divine, that it's the primary experience of the divine, just like the universe. The mother for an infant is the universe. It's the divine for the infant, and it includes the total range that the child will ever experience, but in a not fully articulated way. And that's what education is, to articulate that instinct of enfolding children and for us to feel that we are enfolded throughout our lives is so important. And the children today are going to need this in a very, very special way, because their experience of the natural world is going to be fragmentary for the most part, and in many cases it will almost be non-existent. For children, I was talking to someone in Manhattan not long ago about education, and the woman I was talking to said that she was trying to get an 11th month educational program for the children in Manhattan, a school education, and I asked her, wasn't that a little much? And she said that you have to understand these children. When these children leave school and go home, they go to the apartment and go to where they live and close the door, and they're in that apartment from that time till they go back to school. You can't go out on the street and play. The mother is probably working and at best could bring the child for a little marketing perhaps. But the children never see the stars in the city because the city lights and so forth. They don't even see the stars. And they have some fragmentary experience of a tree and all that. But I was talking to a teacher from Chicago, Barbara Lawrence, who teaches slow learning students from 12 to 16, and very rough area. They have to lock the doors of the classroom because on occasion people have just walked into the classroom, picked up a child, taken them out, never seen again. And that this, so that in her classroom, you don't even have windows. You have to paint windows, paint curtains on. All birds for these, it's a very rough neighborhood. And all birds are pigeons. I see a bird, it's a pigeon. There's a certain pathos of it, but she brings a leaf into the classroom and lets them, and takes them out on the ground. There are a few trees around, and gets them to see a leaf or this and that. She goes to the pet store occasionally and borrows an animal for the day. And she wanted to borrow a spider and didn't have any spiders that day, so she got a tarantula. The children just fascinated. This tarantula. She's one of the most remarkable people around. You should know her name, Barbara Lawrence. Remarkable person. She generally comes down to these meetings and is one, together with Marnie Miller, and I was, these are two very, very creative young women. And in Canada, I had a program up there last year, and I forgot, oh yes, it was on women's movement, the ecology and feminism, and anyway, these were two other people there, and I venture to comment in the process, the two most dangerous people in the world were Barbara Lawrence and Marnie Miller. Most dangerous to the existing order of things. But to conclude this about the children and of things, that there are three words that I use. Survive, critique, create. It's a good way, I think, to approach college students. It sounds somewhat grim, and it is in a way, because in my view, overall view, and I have a very dark side to my view, as you probably can understand or observe, that the children are going to live amid the ruins of the industrial world and amid the ruins of the natural world itself. Most of the children, or at least a very large percentage of the children, and in fact the human community in general is going to be living amid the ruins, and that's something that we have to think about. And how do you do that creatively? How do you heal and give the natural world an opportunity to restore itself, and how do you participate in it? How does a child grow up with a sense of the challenge without being paralyzed by it? And that's the problem that I face continuously. I have on occasion with audiences, after speaking for an hour and not giving enough of the way to a better thing, leave audiences paralyzed sometimes. But that's one of our problems. How to be absolutely realist and absolutely visionary. How to develop the dreams at the same time to provide the techniques and the challenges and so forth. And of course, that's something that we have here, I think, and one of the hopes that Jim and the rest of us that have been involved in organizing this weekend are trying to present. There are some visionary things and some just very, very practical things, and how one should lead to the other. But survive, critique, create. The first thing is survive. These children in New York have to survive. They have to survive the concrete and the steel and the surroundings and all of that. And not just survive in a grim and destroyed way. You can't survive and still be destroyed. And then to critique, to know the devastating aspect of things, and to have a deep feel for the creative aspect of things. So the person has a critical consciousness that is not a desperate consciousness, but a buoyant consciousness. And that requires a certain poise of mind that we have to develop, assist the children. Nature will provide it if we give them half a chance. The children will have the grace to do this, and then create. Enormously important. They have to create a new order of things.